A lot of school boards and local governments parking taxpayer cash in money market funds used to seem like a no-brainer, but that was before the subprime mortgage mess.
Our Shivani Joshi tells us now how towns and cities in Florida are scrambling to save their investments and explain what happened to their constituents. Last week, Shivani, we had on somebody who runs a fund in Florida. She pulled out this public money. There's a lot of teachers and other public employees. Quickly, as soon as she got a whiff of what was going on, and we're just wondering, what's the status now? What's going on in that area?
Well, the same is happening. It's not just happening in Florida. It's happening in Montana. It's happening in Connecticut. It's happening in Maine. It's happening all over the place. You're realizing that the fallout from the subprime mortgage mess is finding its way into different places, and now it's finding its way into municipalities in particular. Now, I want to talk about what these muni investment funds are. They're a good way for local governments, schools, fire departments to put their money in a place that earns more money in a safer way, in a liquid way, more so than they would get at a normal bank. So that's why
liquid meaning you can pull it out anytime you want.
And the reason they do this, it's like I said, it's liquid and it's used to fund everyday operating expenses, is used to pay for payroll, things of that nature. But what we're finding out is these investment funds actually have investments in SIVs that are backed by subprime mortgage debt. And when the defaults come in for this subprime mortgage debt, there's a shortfall in cash. And so what you're finding out in particular, like I spoke to someone in Jefferson County, quite literally having a difficult time paying their electricity bill at a school there in that county because they were using the funds from an investment fund to pay their bills every single day. So the impact of this is quite profound, and it's hitting us close to home where we thought we may not ever get hit by the subprime mortgage mess, right?
See, this is so important that you're bringing this more to light to our viewers, because a lot of people have no idea what their exposure is. They think, well, I never outright bought something like that, and they think their investments are safe, but in truth, it appears we're all exposed a lot more than we know.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing, is that it is hitting us closer to home. It's hitting us closer than most of us even thought. I mean, it's funny because even the most savvy financial people out there at the hedge funds and at the banks are falling prey to this. Now, just everyday Americans and municipalities and schools and fire departments and everyone across the board in municipalities are also falling prey to this.
Well, the scary thing is even the most liquid, as you say, accounts, meaning stuff that you assume was safe. If you can pull the money out, that doesn't mean it had any exposure to subprime instruments or these exotic financial instruments.
Right. And you make a good point. I mean, there are very strict rules about what municipalities can invest in, and it's usually across the board investment grade debt only. And on the face, all of these things seem to be, the SIVs seem to hold investment grade debt, so it wasn't like these municipalities were doing anything out of the ordinary, were not following the rules, because they actually were playing by the rules, but they just got burned because of the complexity of these investment vehicles. So that is the tricky thing. One thing I want to note is that Florida had frozen the assets. You mentioned the woman who was concerned about this. A lot of people, a lot of investors in Florida withdrew. In particular, it was $27 billion at the end of September in this Florida investment fund. Last week, there was $14 billion. They froze withdrawals in this investment fund. Today, we heard that they are going to reopen withdrawals because, like I said, people don't have money to pay their electric bills. They need access to this cash. They're going to be able to get access to it. But the challenge is, where is the shortfall going to come from? Is it going to be from taxpayers? There was a proposal to make the Florida Pension Fund foot the bill. That has not been widely accepted.
Now, we don't want to scare folks out there.
Right.
Not everybody lost a lot of cash.
Right.
This woman, for example, pulled her money out before they lost any of the principal that was put in. They may have lost a little bit of the profit that they made over the past year, but the principal was safe.
Correct. And again, we're talking about $27 billion. Of that $2 billion, it's a tenth of it's a tenth, right? It's a tenth there that could be at risk in structured investment vehicles. Not everything across the board is at risk. You make a good point. We have to put a caveat on there, because it is not, at the end of the day, not everything is at risk. And your money is safe at the end of the day, and the states did provide some sort of assurance. So it's not like taxpayers will be footing the bill.
Shivani, thank you very much. But when she talks about people pulling their money out, governments, municipalities, school boards pulling money out of funds that are vulnerable to the subprime mortgage mess, that's called a run on the fund or a run on the bank. Everybody runs in, tries to pull the money out. It happened in London. Could the American public be next to get nervous and make a run on banks?
Could we ever see scenes like this when citizens of the UK lined up to take their money out of Northern Rock? It was only a couple of weeks ago. because they thought the bank might go belly up. That's called a run in a bank. Will there be runs on U.S. banks like there were back in the Depression? We use the D word. Our Fox panel is here now to give us their thoughts. Pat Powell, we're a long way from the D word.
Right.
We're not even sure we could use the R word, recession.
Right. Yeah, this is so improbable. No one ever wants to say never, but this is so improbable. The probability of a run on our banks, resembling what you're seeing in Britain, is approaching zero. The reason is we have FDIC insurance, and those are individuals lining up. But if I were a corporate treasurer for a major Fortune 500 company, I'd be checking out the banks that I'm running my billions of dollars through. So it's really going to be a corporate event, and you might see some corporations changing banks because they're uninsured. But the average guy out there, he does not have more than $100,000 in a single institution.
Peter, what do you think?
Well, certainly, on these structured investment vehicles, one of the problems with them, it's very easy for Wall Street to put a number on a brokerage statement and send it out in the mail. But when people actually ask for their money back, they actually have to sell this stuff. And that's when you find out what it's really worth. And the people who were investing in these things, they got higher yields for a reason. It was because they were taking a lot of risk. They might not have appreciated it because they trusted Moody's and S&P that these ratings were legitimate, but they weren't. But as far as banks, will there be a run on the banks? Maybe. I don't, put much stock in the FDIC. And the other problem is, even if the government makes good on these deposits, what are they going to be worth? People might want to have a run on the bank because they want to get their money so they can convert it to another currency before it loses its value.
By the way, you mentioned Moody's and S&P. We do have the CEO of McGraw-Hill coming up in the show. McGraw-Hill, of course, is the parent company of Standard & Poor's, and we will talk to him about the ratings process, what went wrong, what stopgaps are in place now to make sure that doesn't happen again, because they rate the stuff and people look at it and say, oh, it's rated, okay, I can invest in it.
It's going to be a very interesting interview. Victoria, if I have what I think to be a completely safe account, some money market account, but it's making a lot more percentage-wise than, say, a Treasury bill, say it's making 5–6% interest, should I be somewhat suspicious of this fund?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough question, because some money market funds came out with news that they were exposed to subprime, which just seems completely wrong. And it's just a function of the complexity of our financial system.
By the way, is it illegal? Does it go against their charter to invest in these strange instruments?
Well, I don't think they knew what they were investing in. These guys were buying bundles of mortgages, bundles of asset-backed securities, and they didn't necessarily know that they were buying subprime assets versus, prime assets. So, we probably will see some lawsuits if that's what you're asking, but I don't think it's particularly illegal. Folks have to be very careful. The scary thing about a run on the bank, as Peter was saying, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. All of a sudden, banks have to give you cash and go and liquidate some of the investments that they've made. And if everyone does that, or lots of banks do that at once, it's a really scary situation. What concerns me, too, and this is an important point, is just that information travels so quickly in our society. Folks are on the web all the time. So I think we're particularly sensitive to news and likely to get it very quickly.
We should also make the point that, now you've got some very smart money people, so the so-called fast money like Wilbur Ross, the big financier, and Virgin Money, Richard Branson, making a play for Northern Rock. There's always a yin to the yang there. There's a way to make money when there's a way to lose money. But Gary Kaltbaum, is it absolutely outrageous that we're even talking about things that used to be the highlights of the AT&T commercials, of people waiting in line, the old commercials where you saw the old Depression video? Is that ridiculous to even be discussing at this point?
Liz, it's not fun to discuss these things, but I have to tell you, I think it's quite important that we do. And the reason being is, when you're dealing with people's money, you're dealing with emotion. People are very emotional about it, and it tends to feed on itself. And something Victoria said is 100% right. Communication is now lightning fast, and you get it on the web, and it tends to feed on itself. And when it comes to what happened in Florida, you got to remember, the people making decisions, big word behind these people, it's called fiduciary. They have a responsibility to make sure where they place the money that one penny is not lost. There was a quote that I read from one person that said, I cannot afford to have one dime out of this account, and that's why they pulled about $13 billion. So will it happen? I don't think banks will ever get in trouble, but certainly we can see something like that. We saw a little bit of that in Countrywide just a few weeks ago when people mixed up the bank versus the lending business.
True. All right. Well, that'll end this discussion for the moment.